I'm training to run a sub 48 second 400, and in this episode I do a ton of high quality speed work, acceleration work, some different testing, and a ton of explosive lifting. I'm super happy with how it went. It's Monday, November 4th. I'm out here for the last warm week of training for probably the next 2 or 3 months. I just took a very easy deload week because I was getting a lot of fatigue built up. I was doing really heavy, really slow lifting for a long time. Ended up working up to a safety bar split squat of 295 pounds with a 6-second eccentric. So I'm pretty happy with that. But as you can imagine, really heavy eccentric lifting just fries your body and your nervous system. So I was running pretty slowly, and I've also been battling a bunch of Achilles tendonitis. So I took a week to chill out, reset, did a bunch of rehab for my Achilles. They're feeling better than they felt in probably 2 months right now. So that's great. Sprinting today is probably going to aggravate them again, and that's unfortunate. And in an ideal world, I'd probably take another week to 2 weeks to maybe even 3 weeks of just doing rehab stuff. But my season is sort of coming up, and so I don't feel like I have time to waste. With that being said, I'm trying to learn from my mistakes. I spiked up volume way too fast. I spiked up intensity way too fast. Really early in the year, I was doing things like 300s. I did a workout that was 300, 30-second rest, and then a 150. The kind of stuff you might do when you're peaking. You want a really hard stimulus, but I was doing it super early on, and I was running good times that I'm happy with, but it doesn't really matter if you run times you're happy with in June if you're gonna compete in April the following year. So I'm a changed man. I'm doing things smarter this time. Taking it really chill today with 10-meter flies. I'll be pretty quickly building those up to longer flies. I'm also gonna be very heavily focusing on acceleration. Obviously today's not because it's like a speed-focused day, but my acceleration is the big weak point in my sprinting. And if I don't get that better, I'm not gonna run the 100 I want, I'm not gonna run the 200 I want, and if the speed's not there, I'm not gonna be able to run the 400 I want. So the stuff in the weight room is gonna be focused around time to peak velocities that match the ground contact times you would see during acceleration. Time to peak velocity means how fast you reach the fastest speed in a certain lift. So for example, if you did something that had 100 millisecond time to peak velocity, that would be simulating max speed sprinting because you have about 100 milliseconds to produce force into the ground while you're sprinting. And early acceleration, your feet stay on the ground longer. So the first couple steps, you might be able to target like 300 or 400 milliseconds. So anyway, all the exercises are gonna be focused on acceleration at this point, and I'm gonna be shying away from the heavy, slow lifting. Just trying to keep an overall state of freshness and really work on my explosiveness, and again, acceleration specific work. I'm gonna get something like a bar speed tracker like the eNode sensor as soon as I can, which will really help me with these explosive lifts to know that I'm targeting the exact zones that I want to be for focusing on different aspects of the sprint. Here, like I mentioned, I'm targeting something between the 300 to 400 millisecond range, doing some weighted strike jumps and some regular counter movement jumps. Later on, I start messing around a little bit with some non-counter movement jumps, which are probably more specific to the very first step, which is my biggest weak point in the sprint for sure. But for now, I was just sticking with regular counter movement jumps and some walking counter movement jumps, which speeds up the ground contact a little bit. I did a lot more after that, but my phone ended up dying, and so I wasn't able to record. I did some weighted step-ups and then some quarter squats as explosively as I could manage. Then I did a light recovery day, trying to work all my body parts through a full range of motion, get loose, get feeling good, did a little bit of pogos and some form drills. Just typical stuff, getting in a little more volume on the track without introducing a lot of fatigue. Today I'm doing force velocity profiling and load velocity profiling. So I have splits set up for 5 meters, 10 meters, 20 meters, and 30 meters. And then once I do 2 to 3 full speed run-throughs of this, I'm switching over to yard measurements. And I'm gonna do an all-out 30-yard unweighted, 25-yard with 25% of my body weight, 20-yard with 50% of my body weight, and 15-yard with 75% of my body weight. So the first test is for the force velocity profiling. That'll give me my total force produced and my ratio of horizontal force to vertical force. And the load velocity profiling basically allows me to determine what weight I need to choose to target certain velocity decrements in my training. So a really good range for power in the first 1 to 2 steps of the start, which is where I'm really weak, is 50 to 60% velocity decrement. And so doing this will help me figure out what I need to do to achieve those numbers. I'm using Photo Finish automatic timing to do this. My channel's unofficially partnered with them, and so I have 2 tablets and 3 phones out here. 1 phone to do the start, got a tablet for the 5 meter split, tablet for the 10 meter split, and then a phone for the 20 meter split and 30 meter split. A lot of my starts with the resisted accelerations were really rough looking. The first couple steps I was barely moving, and that was partially because I'm bad in that portion of a sprint and I wasn't used to it, and also partially because I didn't have the belt set up quite right, and so it felt like it was going to rip and tear and just like pop right off of me, and it's brand new, so I did not want that to happen. Overall, got some pretty disappointing numbers in my force velocity profiling, but at the end of the day, all that's doing is giving me a reference point that I can use to improve over time going into the future, and I can't be upset by comparing myself to elite sprinters because obviously I'm not an elite sprinter, and I just have to see where I am now and get joy out of pushing my boundaries and improving over time, because that's why I love the sport anyway. There you got to see me do some of my sort of heavy step ups, and then I went on to use a banded, I think, hack squat machine, and what the bands do is allow me to get a faster turnaround at the bottom of each rep while still using sort of heavy weights. That's one that I'm going to be really interested to test out with an E-Node sensor later on and see how much resistance bands change my time to peak velocity and peak velocity that I hit, as well as the impact that weight has and what different combinations do. I'm really interested to see how that goes. My next sprint day, I came out for some 20 meter flies, which was, I believe, my first time doing them anytime recently. For some reason, I kept running in the wrong lane and I had to move over, but if you ignore that, it was a pretty decent sprint session. It was chillier than I would have liked it to be, but of course I'm out there running shirtless, so I can't really complain about that. And overall, I thought it was a decent session. My acceleration wasn't feeling great into the reps, and my top speed wasn't feeling great either, but you're not going to feel great all the time. Then I was back in the gym for another explosive lift, and you'll notice a lot of these lifts are getting repetitive, but it's because I'm just trying to get good at a select few exercises right now. Over time, I'll probably add more variety into things, but for now, I'm cool just trying to get good at these exercises. Again, trying to target that acceleration zone of like 300 to 400 milliseconds time to peak velocity, but also again, I'm not actually tracking it, so I might not even be close. I've also been working on some explosive upper body work, but it's usually a little harder to record that, and so I haven't been showing it all that much. I also added in a new variety of machine leg work that sort of simulates the step up just from a slightly different angle. That felt really good, and later on I ended up adding bands to that, and I enjoyed the results I got with that. I felt like they were explosive and powerful and were achieving all the things I needed them to achieve. I wish I had spent more time this year working on maximal strength, even if it wasn't focusing on movements like a full deep squat. I think if I had done half squats and tried to get as strong as I possibly could at those, it would have paid off greatly, especially for my early acceleration. I ended up getting up to a deep squat of 300 pounds, which is decent. It's like 1.7 or 1.8 times my body weight. And so there's a chance that my half squat would be double body weight or even higher. But I just wish I had spent a little more time focused on that aspect of training this year, because it would be nicer to be able to use a little higher loads on this power stuff that I'm doing. But at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. And it just leaves me a bunch of routes for improvement moving into the future. I can focus on the power side of things. I can focus on building up my maximal strength. Ideally, eventually I'll be able to move 2.5 times body weight or more in some of the key lifts. I don't think metrics like that really matter, but from what I've heard, you want to be able to move somewhere between 1.7 and 2 times your body weight really fast in order to have a good acceleration. And so being able to move at least 2.5 times your body weight more slowly seems like a pretty good starting point. So next year, there'll be a much larger emphasis on that strength development, and I'll have access to the E-Node sensor all year since I'm going to pick it up relatively soon. And so I can really start to understand how different movements and different modifications lead to different times to peak velocity and work maximal strength while still doing it somewhat quickly, both sides of the force velocity curve at the same time. Then I came out to the track for another acceleration day. We're off to a really good start here. I'm basically doing 5-yard flies, but that's not really the point. The point is I'm doing 15-yard accelerations at 50% velocity decrement, which means I'm targeting basically the point of highest power in the sprint and targeting a 5-yard split at between 1 and 1.01. And this first one I just hit 0.99, so off to a very solid start. I actually wrote the times in miles per hour this time around, and I was targeting 10.25 miles per hour. That rep was actually significantly faster than intended. Big fall off that time, but that's okay. I got a couple days till my next workout. I'm really happy with how that went. I really enjoy resisted sprinting. I think it transfers well for me. And what I'm going to be doing later on is, of course, lightening the loads that I use, and then also doing contrast sets where I do a weighted set followed by an unweighted set back and forth. Then I was back in the gym again with some shorts that were a little too short for my preference, but it is what it is. This time around for my jumps, I was trying to land with a straight leg so that I had a better understanding of how high I was actually jumping. When you pull up your legs for a traditional box jump, it turns into more of a who can pull their legs up higher competition as opposed to who can jump higher. So that's why I started landing with straight leg. Then we did some more of the banded explosive squats and some of the explosive step ups with the machine. Doing this type of training makes my legs feel very warm, sort of like I'm getting a pump from doing hypertrophy style lifting, but of course it's not hypertrophy style lifting, so it's a little bit of a strange sensation, but I always leave with like very warm, blood-filled legs. It's probably great for recovery, for performance, for releasing hormones to help you recover and come back stronger, like testosterone and growth hormone and all that kind of stuff. And it's also just super fun. If you've been doing a lot of slow grinding lifts, it can start to wear on your mentality a little bit. I love lifting heavy, but when you do it a ton, it can start to get a little bit exhausting. So doing these fast lifts has rekindled my joy for sprinting even more. I've been absolutely loving it. I'm super excited to see how my training progresses from here. There's some cool things coming in the future, including a video explaining my updated plan to break 48 in the 400 this year. And I'm also going to let you guys know when I'll be racing. And then I'm going to be looking at some science of 400 meter performance, and we'll drop a video on that. Super excited to get it to you guys and see what you think. Thanks a lot for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.